Hi, good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Gerald Lawrence. I'm the chairman of the County Board of Elections, and we'll call to order the November 9th, 2021 meeting of the Board of Elections. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll stand and say the pledge. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So the agenda was published yesterday. It's been distributed to the board members. Does anybody have any comments on the? You know what? I realized this microphone is only for the broadcast. There's no microphone within this room. There's no amplification. I tapped on it before and I said, oh, I don't hear it. And then it occurred to me it's only for the broadcast. So I will try to project my voice as best I can with the mask. The agenda, anyone have any additions or changes to the agenda?
No.
Okay, so we'll proceed. Next is the typically the approval of the minutes. We have no minutes to review today. Item 5 is going to be Mr. Allen's report. When you're ready, Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board. Overall, we had a very successful election despite some challenges, at least on our end. We had a two-ballot election for the first time. Voters understood it. We constructed it in such a way so that the delivery of the ballots to the precincts came collated, so there wasn't this problem that you typically have with an election where the poll workers are only handing out ballot A. So we had that. We had a system in place for spoiled ballots and everything else. Pickup and drop off went smoothly. We had more testing of our ballots than ever before, so that the readability of the election day ballots was virtually guaranteed. We were at the print shop testing them. We tested them through pre-election logic and accuracy testing. We also did test decks, so the combination of tests exceeds anything that any other jurisdiction in the Commonwealth performs, and that worked out on Election Day. So the warehouses work, the bureaus work on the testing and everything else, that worked out. What we learned that we will have to test in the future, and this has never been a problem before, is the same printing vendor who performed well on the printing of the ballots did not do so well on two of the batches of the mailings, and one of them was misaddressed to 708 voters. Fortunately, it was one of the smaller files. However, it created a lot of difficulties for our staff, for our voters, more importantly, and ultimately is spilled over a little bit into Election Day. But overall, Election Day calls from our poll workers were fewer than we've ever had before. The complaints were not having to do with the election administration, but typically with disturbances or disagreements at the polling place. But we did have to contend with, in the days leading up to Election Day, issues with replacement ballots for the people who were affected by the 708 that were part of File 4 that were handled by the vendor, as well as 65 voters who our staff inserted the wrong envelope. Different issue entirely, but nonetheless related. So I want to congratulate our warehouse, who was shorthanded throughout this whole process and still beat and exceeded every deadline and still made sure that every election supply carrier or cage was properly equipped. Jim Savage's team really turned it up a notch this election, even when the printing vendor, for example, was later than expected with the ballot delivery. Same for voter registration. We were thinking that with 1,400 provisional ballots, it was going to take until Friday and it would be close call. They pretty much finished up all their work today. So, and that's with, in spite of some objections, which they didn't have in the primary. They were even having time to go back, and the objectors were, as I understand it, unobjecting or withdrawing their objections to several items. And lastly, the Bureau of Elections did a really good job, and we're about to go through some of the reports on the exceptions, and I'm going to be asking your recommendations on a few items. So with that, if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
I don't have any questions in particular. I will say I think that things did go remarkably well. This is our third cycle using the equipment in this fashion. We did use it for the one cycle that we did the central tabulation, and things have continued to get smoother. I know it just seemed anecdotally there was fewer complaints from poll workers about equipment and malfunctions and so forth. I think election day itself went rather smoothly. Obviously there's concern about the vendor and the mail ballots and so forth, and I know we're looking into that, and we'll address that as we move forward. But on the whole, I think people were generally very pleased with how this election ran. Still in a pandemic, still with masks and other things, we're just better at doing it now. And in particular, and I don't think it can be said enough, you mentioned it, that staffing was a really, really significant difficulty across all aspects of our operation. As many of you know, just from in your communities, when you see businesses and restaurants and so forth that have difficulty getting staff, we had the same very, very difficult challenges and did a lot of things shorthanded, which caused the people we had to work extra hard. And we are very much appreciated the people that we have and the efforts that they made to make this election go as smoothly as it did. So I don't have any other general comments other than that.
And one acknowledgement or admission, however you want to put it, to the staffing, staffing. For example, we have two drop boxes that are indoor locations. One is in Chadds Ford and one is in Radnor. I'm sorry, not Radnor, Ridley. And so the normal follow-up would be that would happen on Wednesday.
A little louder.
The normal follow-up would be on Wednesday, and because people were shorthanded, they did not go back to those two, which are in closed locations, until just yesterday, and cleared out those boxes, so those ballots are being processed. So we regret any inconveniences caused any voter who looked up their status over the last 5 days and thought, I know I used that drop box before Election Day. And so those are being processed. In both cases, there was about 24 ballots that were dropped at each location. So little things like that, staffing issues were, it was challenging. Or we'd have temporary workers one day, and then they decided they didn't want to work at the warehouse or at the bureau the next day, and we're back to the starting point and trying to train somebody new. So thank you.
Anybody else comment?
No, I agree with what you said.
Okay. All right, so why don't we start with the items for consideration?
So the first item has to do with the file 4, vote by mail envelopes I just referenced, where the vendor had the fourth and one of the smaller vote by mail files where they misaddressed the exterior envelope. So Sam Smith was getting Janet Jones's materials, and on the envelope it had Janet Smith, exterior envelope, it had Janet Jones's name, then it had Sam Smith's address. Inside was everything from Janet Jones for the ballot and the return envelope. This created a couple of concerns. Obviously, the possibility of someone abusing that situation and then remailing it, the possibility of getting two from one voter. We also had it complicated in a good way because we had a number of voters that I called Good Samaritans who realized that they received somebody else's materials and actually took it to that other voter. So we couldn't cancel them because then we would cancel and divert the envelope that was rightly voted by the right voter. And at the same time, we had to guard against double voting. So those were remailed, and fortunately, the vast majority of the ballots that we received back on those were to the addressee and signed